The Phantom Archives of Edgar the Architect and Schale by Gen Kagami. Volume 6. Brussels. The Glass Conservatory and Iron Tendrils. Horta Museum. Untethered from the concept of time, the genius architect Edgar and the pearl-haired youth Schale wander through eternity, retaining their youthful, exquisite forms. Across eras, they traverse the world's renowned architectural works and the maddening constructs Edgar himself once assembled. This is a tranquil, decadent journey through phantom architecture, dissecting space, light, gravity, and the anomalies lurking within through cold, unflinching logic. Volume 6. Brussels. The Iron Vines and the Illusion of the Weave. Horta Museum. The Phantom Archives of Edgar the Architect and Schale. Written by Teruo Miyahara. English translation and spatial reconstruction by Gen Kagami. Untethered from the concept of time, the genius architect Edgar and the youth, with pearl-coloured hair, Schale, wander through eternity, retaining their youthful, exquisite forms. Across eras, they traverse the world's renowned architectural works and the maddening constructs Edgar himself once assembled. This is a tranquil, decadent journey through phantom architecture, dissecting space, light, gravity, and the anomalies lurking within through cold, unflinching logic. 1. Iron Vines and the Illusion of the Weave. Brussels, the capital of the north. Escaping the heavy cold drizzle that soaked the streets, the two soundlessly slipped into the quiet residence of Victor Horta in the Saint-Gilles district, specifically into the dim drafting room in the basement. Within this womb of beauty bordering on madness, where iron writhes like vegetation and glass draws sensual curves, the hard, chilly air from the time the master still drew his blueprints remained stagnant. The amber light of the basement caused Schale's figure to emerge like a magic lantern. His hair, reaching his shoulders and faintly harbouring the external moisture, flowed down to his nape, thinner and more fragile than even the finest linen thread. A single stray lock curled secretly behind his ear, flickering in the light like golden sand, bordering the elusive and haunting silhouette of a youth who knew not death. Enveloping his fragile frame was a loosely knit sweater of coarse mesh, coloured like pearl ash mixed with a single drop of night mist. The neckline, decadently wide, exposed the faint hollows of his collarbones, while his wax-white fingertips peeked from sleeves that were far too long. Each time he shifted slightly, the soft animal wool made a faint rustle, and the translucent white skin glimpsed through the gaps in the mesh, vibrated the air with a sweet, languid sorrow. In contrast, Edgar's attire was heavy and imposing, as if to shroud his serene cruelty. He wore a thick Harris tweed jacket, a complex and obsessive weave of moss green from a forest submerged in night, and the colour of sodden crow feathers. The texture of the hard rustic wool that repelled the rain highlighted his unwavering posture like a marble sculpture, trailing a faint scent of old books and winter rain. The bangs falling over his intelligent profile drew a smooth jet-black waterfall without a single mote of disarray, as if a slice of the freezing night air itself had been cut and pasted there. Edgar quietly traced the edge of the oak desk, where Horta must have once driven his pen as if possessed, with a long finger stripped of its glove. From here on, it is a passage only for the chosen. His voice was low, chilly, and definitive. Beyond the arch leading to the central stairwell where he directed his gaze, a dazzling public space opened its mouth, where soft light pouring from the skylight dyed the marble steps and iron vines in gold. The plant motifs on the walls writhed like creatures with blood in their veins, and the brass of the handrails became fluid, inviting the two into the circulation of the master. 2. The partitioned bloodline and the footsteps of shadows. The light sliding down from the skylight dropped a mottled scale pattern of gold and jade onto the shoulder of Schale's pearl ash knit. He climbed the marble spiral staircase, his slender neck tilted slightly, as if the weight of the light itself were painful. Edgar, I hear someone's hurried steps right behind the wall. Schale's soft voice echoed through the atrium like a ghost. Stitching through the silence of the resplendent front, the sound of shoe soles striking wooden steps, terribly inorganic and pressing, could be heard from behind the wall. The circulation of the servants. Behind these beautiful curves, shadow stairs are entwined like viscera, so they do not mingle with the masters of the front. Two bloodlines that never intersect. It is exactly like the humans residing in time and ourselves, is it not? Edgar spoke quietly, his long fingers peeking from the heavy Harris tweed cuff as he stroked the cold brass handrail. His voice was low and definitive, harbouring a faint resonance of self-derision. 3. The mirrors in the high ceiling and the two atop the stepladder. Eventually, the two reached the top floor of the house. It was a room where plant motifs crawled from the walls to the ceiling, the entire space designed like a gargantuan greenhouse. However, Schale's gaze was fixed upon two horizontal mirrors embedded face to face at the very top of the room, just beneath the ceiling. Facing mirrors, but they're so high you can only see the patterns of the ceiling from down here. Edgar stood silently before a hidden door for servants that was integrated into the wall and invisible, and rang a small call bell. Shortly after, a part of the wall opened soundlessly, and a servant dressed in black appeared with downcast eyes. Edgar gave a short instruction, and the servant vanished into the rear circulation like a wraith, eventually bringing in an old wooden stepladder. They never attempted to look at the master's face, merely fulfilling their role like machines, before vanishing behind the wall once more. Come, Schale. Edgar climbed the stepladder first and extended his hand. Schale pulled up his long sleeve slightly and entrusted his wax-white fingers into that hand. The moment the two stood side by side on the narrow top platform, their faces appearing between the facing mirrors. 4. The corridor of time and the far end of the past. At first, it was a commonplace. Infinity of space. Within the front and back mirrors, Edgar in his tweed and the fragile Schale in his knit were linked hundreds and thousands of times. But abruptly, the air in the room took on a heavy viscosity like gelatin. Schale, it comes. Space has begun to long for time. Amidst a dense silence that made breathing difficult, the scenery in the mirror transformed from space into time. Be careful, Schale. If you are imprisoned in this infinitely multiplying corridor of the past, your white porcelain flesh will become eternally lost. In the mirror ahead, the corridor reflecting the future, stood the two of them exactly as they were now, no matter how deep one peered. A cursed yet beautiful line of despair, destined for eternal cessation, neither growing nor aging. Meanwhile, Edgar's jet-black eyes were sucked into the depths of the mirror behind the corridor reflecting the past. There, layered in tears, were the two of them standing in the recent concrete monastery, the two of them covered in the ash of Notre Dame, the two of them looking up at the angel of Reims. But when he strained his eyes into the depths of that line of the past, to the point where his vision blurred, Edgar's breathing stopped. The line of the two of them, that should have been infinitely linked, abruptly ended at a certain point. The youth with pearl-coloured hair, who should have stood beside him, melted away like a mirage, and in the mirror's corridor, only the figure of Edgar, alone, wearing a jet-black coat, began to link endlessly. And at the far end of the past, even deeper into that line of solitude, there stood the past Edgar himself, possessing a vibrant heat and a fragile glasswork-like delicacy, lacking his current chilly perfection form. From the dimness behind that youth, a woman emerged as if huddling close. Her skin was translucent as thin ice, her hair luxurious as if spun from moonlight. She merely stared back at the Edgar on this side of the mirror, with eyes filled with sorrow. Edgar's long fingers gripped the edge of the stepladder until they turned white. His usual glacial mask cracked completely, his widened eyes fixed upon the phantom of his former self and the woman of moonlight, staring back from the bottom of Horta's infinite-facing mirrors. The end of the dream and the silent tea party. At the moment, the phantom of the woman, with hair like spun moonlight, stared back from the mirror's depths with eyes full of grief. "Monsieur Edgar, tea is prepared." Abruptly, a voice terribly flat and stripped of emotion echoed from behind the servant's hidden door. That single sentence shattered the gelatinous air of the room as easily as breaking thin ice. Instantly, the agonizing link of time in the mirror vanished, leaving only the figures of the youth in tweed and pearl-ash grey standing atop the old wooden stepladder, reflected as a chilly space. Edgar slowly released the tension in his long, stiffened fingers and let out a faint breath. Schale asked nothing, merely grabbing Edgar's cuff like a frightened small bird, and the two descended the stepladder in silence. The dining room they were guided to was a space of dizzying beauty, entirely composed of curves, a table with mahogany legs entwined like plant vines. Upon it sat two white porcelain teacups, delicate as thin skin, steaming side by side. But the two sat facing each other across that beautiful table without exchanging a single word. Schale's eyes, fragile as glass, wandered over Edgar's sunken profile several times, but he could not find his voice. Edgar's gaze remained fixed on the surface of the reddish-brown tea, unmoving. Schale could not fathom how much despair and nostalgia the phantom scene at the end of that infinite past had called forth within him. Tick, tick, somewhere in the house. The sound of clock hands marking time echoed. To them who knew not death, it was a meaningless sound, until the heat of the tea had completely cooled and the mist of Brussels outside the window was dyed in the colours of dusk. A dense, heavy silence enveloped them, as if hundreds of years of infinite time had flowed away within that single room alone. 6. Service of the Master. Eventually, the endless silent tea party concluded. The servant in black appeared soundlessly once more and ushered the two toward the entrance. They descended not the resplendent main staircase, but the quiet shadow circulation. When the heavy oak entrance door was opened, the outside had completely sunk into the cold night mist. The faint light of the gas street lamps made the cobblestones shine like wet obsidian. The moment the two crossed the threshold and inhaled the cold external air, the servant in black, about to close the door behind them, gave a deep, quiet bow. At that moment the light of the street lamp briefly illuminated the servant's face, which had been cast down until then, a strong-willed profile with a fine moustache. deep, intelligent artist's eyes that seemed to see through everything, unbefitting the class of a servant. Seeing this, a rare smile, like the spring thaw, suddenly appeared on Edgar's frozen, handsome face. In this house, the man had yielded the radiant master's circulation to the phantoms residing in time, and had served them himself by passing through the shadow circulation behind the walls. Yes, that servant in black was none other than the creator who had brought this agonizingly beautiful house into being, Victor Horta himself. Edgar said nothing, merely giving a quiet, respectful nod toward him. Horta too nodded deeply in silence, and slowly closed the heavy door. Clack! The sound of the brass key falling echoed in the cold mist. With their backs to the closed Art Nouveau house, Edgar and Schale began to walk once more. "Hey Edgar, shall we go eat some mussels?" Schale smiled in the cold mist, peeking his wax-white fingertips from the sleeve of his pearl ash knit. Edgar did not stop his pace, merely letting out a small breath as if a possession had departed, deep within the heavy collar of his Harris tweed. "Yes, let's do that, Schale. The mussels at Aux Armes de Bruxelles in Îlot Sacré are exquisite." The sound of their footsteps striking the damp cobblestones was quietly absorbed into the night of Brussels. Their aimless walk was not yet over. End of Volume 6.